Okay, let's meet the teachers. Erica, welcome. So great to have you joining us. What is your experience with the 403B, past and present?
All right, let me start just by saying good evening to everybody, especially anyone from CPS. This is the end of the semester to us, so I know we're all crunching those grades and doing last minute meetings with students and trying to get all our kids to be successful this particular semester. So thank you all for joining us. We're aware that it's a busy time, so we really appreciate you joining us tonight. Um, my experience with the 403B, I would start with just my year one as a teacher. Your first year, like most teachers, your priorities aren't retirement, right? I was 22 years old. I was just trying to figure out how I was going to have control my classroom, get my lesson plans done, and things like that. But I would, pretty often hear the veteran teachers talking about VALIC and the VALIC advisors coming into the school and this and that. And they would suggest that I should meet with him, open an account and everything. And I did. And I'm glad I did, right? Everyone has good intentions. Open up a retirement account, start planning for your future, start investing, and things like that. So I did. I started in about 2000, 2001, contributing to the 403B with VALIC. I started contributing probably around 50 bucks a check, right? At that time, 50 bucks a check was fine, enough for me. I wasn't even thinking about it retiring, but I felt like that was a good one. So that's about 2001-ish. I did not revisit it or think about it for years. It wasn't until about 2011 where my church was hosting a Dave Ramsey Financial Peace University class in 2011. And so that made me kind of just learn a little bit more about retirement plans and retirement vehicles and things like that. So I revisited it, looked at my account in 2011, probably like my 10th or 11th year of teaching, saw the account, the balance, and I'm like, that's fine. Okay. I guess. Didn't think anything of it, didn't know which questions to ask, didn't know anything else. I just thought, okay, I have a retirement plan. Fast forward to about 2017 when I really started to educate myself on the retirement supplemental plans that CPS has for us. Aside from our pension, it was important for me to understand my supplemental plans. And so I started to learn a little bit about the 403B. And I learned also that year that CPS began to offer a 457, which is very similar in many ways. But I started to learn, went back into my CPS account with VALIC, my 403B account with VALIC. And now I have a little bit of education in retirement vehicles, in fees, in index funds, and things like that. So I'm comparing that to my own account, and I see that number one, my account and our options at the time that the CPS had under VALIC, it was like producing like subpar returns. Like it rarely ever beat the market index, my own, where I had my money parked in my portfolio. It was rarely making more than a passively managed index fund. Not only that, but I learned that I was paying more than 1% in fees. To me, 1% did not seem like anything. Like 1% is 1%. You'll learn tonight that 1% is much more than we thought. That's one of the things that I'm hoping you do walk away with tonight is the amount of fees. We are paying or were paying outrageous fees, like should be illegal type of fees. I learned that the 403B is not as protected or supported federally as much as a 401k. Like we are really left out to dry in terms of school districts and teachers and things. So I learned a little bit about that. So I educated myself to different vehicles, including 403BYs, which is where we're coming from you tonight. Thanks to 403BYs, I really did learn about the fees and their impact on our retirement plan. But thankfully tonight, we do got some good news. We do have some good news. And there are some changes that have been made to our retirement plan. We're going to be, the changes have happened, and these are some of the things that I like about the plan. First, we used to have three vendors They were AIG, or VALIC, I should say. VALIC, formerly known as VALIC, it's AIG now, Voya and Empower. Okay, so now we have one. We have AIG. So what I like about that is that there is one vendor, so it makes things simpler. That we have one vendor as opposed to three that we had before, and as opposed to over 25, which some school districts do have over 25 vendors. If you're like me, I have analysis paralysis. I could take a very long time to research and make a decision. So the simplicity of this new plan is very beneficial for us. So it's one vendor, AIG, and the products themselves are way better than the ones we had before. I was telling you earlier that my returns, my portfolio was rarely ever beating a passive market. Like I could have just parked my money into an index fund, and that by itself, passively managed, would have done better than what I was doing in the portfolio that was being handpicked by advisors. So the great thing is that this new plan offers several new options that include low cost, passively managed index funds. It includes Vanguard funds, which are the top in the market in terms of a vendor, in terms of a portfolio and the low fees. And I like that we have access to Vanguard funds, and we have access to what's called a target date fund. For any investor who's like me, kind of doesn't understand what's going on in the market, wouldn't know where to park my money, I like that a target date fund takes the year that I plan to retire and automatically rebalances or readjusts every year the percentage that I have in stocks and bonds. It adjusts it according to the year that I want to retire. So as I get closer to retirement, it's going to readjust for me, and it's going to keep a little bit more of my money safer in bonds while still investing in stocks. So I like that we have Vanguard, we have one vendor. I like that we have access to low cost index funds and target date funds. And I think that's great for us. And you're going to learn a lot tonight, but it is good news. I do want to share that.
My wish would be that every school employee in the country had the depth of knowledge of Erica, and then you could put us out of business. We would not be needed anymore. Erica, super impressive depth of knowledge. Again, thanks for, I know that you help your colleagues understand their investments. You're a great advocate for them. And thank you so much for sharing your experience with the 403B. Really appreciate it. Okay. Up next is Dustin Voss. We met Dustin way back in 2016, and we actually interviewed him on our podcast. We have a weekly podcast called Teach and Retire Rich, and I'm posting the link there, Dustin. We were all younger back then, almost 5 years ago.
Interviewed my students. My students for the interview. Okay.
They were the focus. That's right. It was so good. Well, Dustin is no longer in that same position he was when we met him in 2016. He has an exciting new job. So I don't know if you want to touch on that and also your experience with the 403B.
Yeah. So I started with the district back in 2007. I was displaced after my first half year teaching due to low enrollment, and I subbed for a year. And I read a bunch of books during that year. A bunch that helped me become a better teacher, like Kylene Beers and Gloria Thompson, but also Ramit Sethi's "I Will Teach You to Be Rich." And I sort of that's when I started to think about fees. And I lucked when I got a permanent job at Fanger, where I was from 2009 until I took the job in 2020 as the district's financial education specialist. I was the union delegate there as well, and active in CORE, Karen Lewis's caucus. And I became an advocate for our pension first, and then our supplemental retirement program. And I lucked in at Fanger that they asked me to teach financial literacy or economics. So every year I was learning more and more. I used to have my students do this comparative literary analysis, where they'd read my favorite authors, Robert Kiyosaki and Ramit Sethi, but then they could pick any other book. And I would buy it if I couldn't find it at the library. And they would have to compare whatever advice they were getting from that book to the ones we read in class, and hundreds of books over the years. And that's how I came across Dan and Scott's book, started posting in their forum, and they invited me. And I became an even bigger advocate for 403B reform, because the people would come in selling index annuities, and as I would very politely ask questions, they would use every used car salesman trick in the book, start to compliment me. Oh, you ask such good questions. Oh, I can tell I'm talking to somebody that knows something, and just, put that powder on someone else's ass. But but it really hurt me, because as teachers started to trust me, they'd start to say, hey, why is my check so small? And we'd look, and there'd be an annuity, maybe a supplemental insurance program, and these people were invited into our buildings. So 2018, I'm on Janice Jackson's Teacher Advisory Council downtown. And if anyone else found there, the way that works is you get there and they ask you like what project you want to work on, and then they steer you to the project that they wanted you to work on. What I wanted to work on was reforming the 403B 457 program. And I was getting a lot of blank stares, except from one woman I talked to. And I guess they knew there was an issue, and they had already been seeking to reform it. It was a lot of years in the making, primarily Sandy, Dr. Keaton, because AIG, they won this RFP, this request for proposal, because they agreed to take on not only the records from VALIC and Empower, but also all the legacy providers, the MetLifes and others, that if you're really long. So AIG is now handling all that record keeping, but there's a bunch of other great things that was in that RFP that that Erica already spoke about how we're more protected now, how we have better options and lower fees. So that's my gig. I'm no longer the union delegate, but hey, I miss my union now that I'm in central office. I'll say that.
Thank you, Dustin. And as you can tell, he's another example of these assets, these jewels that we're so fortunate to have at school districts around the country. Teaching by itself is more than a full-time job. And the fact that people like Erica and Dustin and our next guest, Tom, take on these additional responsibilities, often centered around their colleagues. It's why teachers are my favorite group of people to hang out with. Thanks, Dustin. Really appreciate all you do. Okay, Tom. Tom has a lot of knowledge about this plan. He has been quite active on the 403BY's Facebook group, answering questions about the plan, helping teachers with the transfer process. Again, I know they're not the only three in the district doing this kind of stuff, but we feel so lucky to have met them. Tom, over to you.
Thanks. First, I want to say thanks, Dan and Scott, for allowing us a platform for teachers to learn more from your expertise. And I remember just listening to Dustin and Erica. I mean, the stories that they go through, I'd be repeating the same story. It seems so similar, especially with Erica, where we talked about the first year where it started so long ago. And a guy just walked in, sold me a bunch of stuff. I thought, my retirement would be taken care of. My money was growing, and I never really paid attention. And 5 years ago, just started reading everything I could about money, about investing, and trying to help as many of other teachers that I realized were in the same spot that I was in a while ago. I can say this, that I have moved my money to AIG. I know more than the average teacher. I don't know as much as Dan and Scott and Dustin, I'm sure, but I'm pretty well read on this, and I feel as confident about this plan as any plan we've had before. And I've liked some of the ones we had before. Most of them I hated, as I learned about them later, but this is the most confident that I've felt if I'm going to invest in a 403 or 457 platform.
All right, thanks, Tom. And Tom will be back to talk a little bit in more detail about the transfer process with the 3 vendors. Yes, even though AIG was the winning vendor, they're also a former vendor because they are offering new products now. But this is what we're about to get into. All right. Okay, Scott, over to you.
All right, thanks, Dan. And thanks, Erica and Dustin and Tom. Learned a lot. When this was being released, the information about this was being released, all 3 of you reached out and was asking us, is this a good plan? Is this a good plan? And I'm like, I don't know. Let's dig into it and find out. And the more we dug into it and talked to people that were involved with it, the more we became very comfortable with it. In fact, I'm comfortable saying this is kind of a model for, I think, the rest of the nation. It really has some neat features to it. We're going to get into that right now, but I want to start out that several people have said that it's gone to a single vendor or just one vendor, and I want to give you a little context around that decision. You had 3 before. Before you had 3 vendors, you had a whole bunch of other vendors. So over the last 10 or 15 years, you've gone from lots and lots of vendors down to fewer vendors and now down to just one. And sometimes that can seem like a bad idea. But I want to go through why it's actually a really good idea if done correctly. The way most public school employers offer retirement plans is kind of stuck in the dark ages. They offer lots and lots and lots of different providers. Dan was saying in the school district where he's at, there's 42 vendors, and all those vendors offer multiple products. So that's a lot to try to dig through. It's almost impossible. And the overwhelming majority of public school employers, they don't take any responsibility for the quality of their retirement programs. And so it's kind of this free-for-all. It doesn't lead to good outcomes. In noticing this, one of the things that we wanted to do was we wanted to show people like how good is your current plan? Because the way things are right now, most retirement programs, they don't really work very well for the employees. They work better for the companies pushing those retirement plans. So last year, 403B-Wise, we began working on a project to grade 14,000 plus school employer plans across the nation. Now we haven't graded all of them yet, but we are giving A through F grades, and we've gotten through about 2,300 through some of my work, a ton of work by Dan and his spouse, who is amazing, and then some volunteers that just are awesome. So we're going to look at that slide. Currently, of the plans that are out there that we've graded, a little over 2,300, only 16% get an F, 29% get a D, 54% get a C. So you read that right. The plans that receive a grade higher than C is less than 1% combined. Almost no plans get a B or an A. And prior to this change that your school employer, that CPS made, you were a B, which was pretty good. And so you might be thinking, okay, we have a B. The good news is we have graded this plan and we believe it's an A. We now say it's an A. But you might be thinking to yourself, okay, we went from a B to an A. How much better could it be? So we're going to kind of go over how much better it actually is, because the improvements are not just incremental. They're actually very good. All right, Dan, next slide. So as you can see, 403B-Wise rates your plan an A. And one more thing I wanted to add before I get any further. Just so you know, a little housekeeping note. For those who aren't familiar with our content, we don't receive any funding from vendors, record keepers, consultants, agents, representatives, advisors. We don't receive any revenue at all from any of those entities. As Dan alluded to earlier, it all comes from the founder of NGPF. So there's no ulterior motive, no agenda here. We're here to hopefully provide you educational information that's unbiased. So One of the benefits of a single vendor, several of the benefits are. So number one, there's one message. You don't have a whole bunch of different vendors, agents running around the school district trying to sell you their particular 403B product, which generally leads to you maybe buying nothing or just buying the product from the person who shows up. When there's only one vendor, there is one unified message to everyone. And the message is about the plan itself. It's about the program itself. It's not about which product is better than which product. And that has a big effect on what we hope it will have a big effect on participation rates. We think this could increase participation in the plan. It should also increase the amount of contributions in the plan. Erica made a point that somebody showed up her first year, which that's great, and got her into the plan, but then she didn't see anybody nobody came by. It was like a decade after that. Well, hopefully with a consistent message from the record keeper here, you're actually going to get some touch points every single year that's going to trigger you to say, oh, maybe I should increase my contributions to my 403B, and it'll be very simple to do so. It should also increase the knowledge about the programs. More school employees are going to learn more about this program because there's only one thing to learn about. And something else that's very unique, cross-selling of commission-based products is going to completely disappear. So before this, you had Voya reps, Empower reps, AIG reps running around trying to get you into your 403B, but they were also trying to get you maybe into an IRA, into a 529 plan. Maybe they're trying to sell you insurance or other financial products. That's not going on anymore. Now, this is not necessarily a byproduct of choosing one vendor. This was actually part of the negotiation process. This was part of the agreement the AIG had to make when they were bidding on the program. And this is something that gets lost with most single vendor programs. It's not a feature of it. This is a feature. There will be no cross-selling of other commission-based financial products, which I think is amazing. Also, your data will be much better protected with a single vendor. So, Dan, let's go to the next slide. We're going to take a look at the basics of the program. Actually, I should have kept you on that slide. Actually, can you go back one slide, Dan? Great. So, as you heard, AIG is the record keeper that's chosen. AIG stands for American International Group. Listeners of our podcast might be scratching their heads right now. What are the wise guys doing promoting a retirement plan run by AIG? Has everything flipped upside down? If you've watched Stranger Things. So we've been more than a little tough on AIG in the past. But after reviewing the terms of this plan, we're very comfortable that the issues that we've had with AIG in the past will not harm this program. There's been sufficient guardrails put in. The structure of this plan is so good that AIG is going to do a wonderful job. We're very comfortable with AIG as the record keeper here. And yes, Dan, we're talking specifically about this plan. So I don't think you have to worry about that. So maybe you're listening to some of our previous podcasts. Maybe you've read some articles. I'm going to try to put you at ease. We're comfortable with AIG being the record keeper here. I think they're going to do a very good job. So we're completely endorsing this program, not a particular record keeper, but this program. And if we see malfeasance, we will point it out. But so far, we're very happy with the way things look. Now, this program, it's not just a 403B. It's actually a combination. It's a 403B plan and a 457 plan. So you're being offered both plans. And we don't have time to go over the differences between those two, but you should know that we have a self-guided tutorial on our website. We'll post that in the chat that will teach you about the differences between a 403B and a 457. I think AIG also will have some resources on their website. Dan and I are also going to re-record our Get Wise to the 403B and 457 event that we do, and we're going to post that on YouTube, so you'll be able to go through that if you can't make one of our other events. The program, so you have a 403B and a 457. You also will be able to make contributions on a pre-tax basis and on a tax-free basis, an after-tax, tax-free basis, which is called Roth contributions. Again, we don't have the time tonight to get into the differences between these two. but we have a self-guided tutorial on 403bwise.org that you can look at. And we're going to record an entire presentation that we'll put on YouTube soon, so you can learn from that as well. So check the events calendar at 403bwise.org. So let's get into the specifics. Some of my favorite stuff here is this program. It offers you the ability to build a globally diversified portfolio at a cost that is among the lowest we have ever seen in the public K-12 space, at least for all of the work that's being done. For those of you who don't want to build your own portfolio, because I realize that can be daunting, you can choose, as Erica had alluded to earlier, the Vanguard Target Date funds. Now, the Vanguard Target Date funds are an investment option where Vanguard basically manages it for you. I can't get too into specifics, but basically you're going to choose a target date with a date that is closest to the date that you plan on retiring, which I think everybody on this event's like, how's 2025 sound? These are, we love Vanguard. We think they're one of the best investment companies out there. One of the reasons we love them is because they have really, really super low fees. Vanguard last year, these exact same target date funds, their pricing was 0.14%, and they're actually still around 0.14%. But come February, Vanguard is dropping the fees on their target date funds to 0.09%. You're going to have access to Vanguard's target date funds at 0.09%, which is amazing. To give you an idea of how much money that is only $9 a year for every $10,000 invested. $9. To give you a little overview of what that looks like if you were in another vendor, the Voya target date funds, they charge $129 for every $10,000 invested per year. 129 versus 9. That is a huge difference. And these funds are likely to perform better over time. Now, if you're one of the people, I see Dan has the target date fund up there. So this kind of gives you an idea of how a target date fund works. It's generally very aggressive. So it's investing in stocks right at the beginning of your career. And as you get closer and closer to retirement, the allocation to stocks gets lower and lower, so that when you're getting close to retirement, you're going to have less risky assets in the fund. So it's not going to fluctuate as much as you get closer to retirement. Also, Barb Healy is telling me that Vanguard target date fund's actually going to drop to 0.08, not 0.09. So even better. Okay. So think about this. Just on this call, Vanguard has dropped their fees by 11%. How do you
We
like
should do
that?
another event, Scott, and they'll keep dropping the fees maybe.
There you go. So now, for those of you who want to get a little more detailed, you want to build your own portfolio, there are some other Vanguard index funds available. So they have the Vanguard Index 500. This tracks the U.S. stock market. It charges 0.04%. That's $4 per $10,000 invested every year. That is as close to free as you can get. And I have a little secret. There's this little thing called securities lending, which I'm not going to get into, but it actually reduces that fee even further. There are some years where you actually outperform the S&P 500. Now, don't expect it. You should be about what the S&P 500 performs minus that fee. But 0.04 is almost as low as you can get. They also have another U.S. stock fund called the Extended Market. What that does is that invests in U.S. stocks that are smaller in size than the S&P 500. To get international exposure, which we think everybody should have international exposure, you have the Vanguard International Index. I believe it's the Vanguard Total International Fund. And that charges 0.11%. If you want to have a bond fund, they have the Vanguard Total Bond Market Index, charges 0.05%. These are rock bottom expense ratios, very, very low in cost, which means that instead of the benefits accruing to a financial services company, they are accruing to you. Now, next slide, Dan. For the portion of your money that you want to take less risk with, there is a fixed account option that's being offered. I believe that it's currently paying a 2% interest rate. Now, I know 2% doesn't sound great, but in this interest rate environment, it's actually pretty good. And that rate's not guaranteed. I'm not exactly sure how long that rate is guaranteed for. I got to double check that, but it's, I believe, through at least to the end of next year. Now, there is one thing that we'll talk about in terms of fixed accounts if you have money at Voya, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. There are some other investment options within the plan that are not Vanguard, but since they're not Vanguard, we don't care. No, I'm just joking. There are some other investment options that are not Vanguard. You can jump on their website and look at them. They have some actively managed funds. So if you're looking for an actively managed investment option, they tend to be a little more expensive, or you want a more socially responsible option, you can choose from a few of those investment options as well. Now for my favorite part, Dan, next slide. The plan administration fee is only $38 per year. $38. This covers the cost of record keeping, consulting, education, enrollment, compliance. It's all for a flat fee of $38 per year, which is sort of unheard of. There's no asset-based fees. There's no additional asset-based fee that's going to be charged. It's just a $38 flat administration fee. So it's literally all of your costs are going to be the cost of the underlying mutual funds. So it could be as low as 0.04% if you choose that index 500 fund, plus $38 a year. This is one of the lowest cost 403B plans we've ever encountered, especially given that there will be reps available to help you move your money, make changes, and in general, help you out with the plan. So, I mean, again, very, very low in cost. Now, the prior vendors were Voya. I think, next slide, Dan? Yeah, so the prior vendors were Voya, Empower, and of course, AIG. And you have the option to leave your money with those prior vendors. Tom's going to go over this a little bit, but you'll be able to leave your money. The question is, should you move your money? And Dan and I have no incentive to get your money moved to the new plan. It doesn't matter to us one way or another in terms of monetary. It doesn't make us any money, but we do. With one exception, we do think it's a good idea to move your money to the new program. The new program is so much lower in cost. It really will be a better idea to move your money. Now, if you're not contributing and your money is at Empower, you're not contributing at all, then it probably doesn't make sense to move your money over to the new plan unless your balance exceeds about $8,500. But if you are contributing your money, it's probably going to be a good idea to move your assets over to the new program. The only time it really doesn't make sense, I think, to move money over to the new program is if you are using the Voya fixed account. The Voya plan, if you're invested in any of their investment options, it's very expensive. And that money you're going to want to move over to the new program. But money that's in the fixed account, they have a 3% guarantee. That is unheard of in the industry these days. You're not going to find that again. So if you have a need to have a portion of your portfolio in safe assets and you have money in the Voya account still, you might consider leaving that money there, especially if it's earning, that 3%, you're just not going to get anywhere else. And we're in a very low interest rate environment. We probably will be for some, at least another year or two, and maybe longer. That might be the one situation where you might want to keep your money there at Voya. But if it's in any of the other investment options, you're going to want to move it to the new plan. The other thing that you'll need to know about Voya, Tom's going to go over this, but it does take about 5 years to get your money out of the Voya fixed account. They have a restriction that it only allows 20% to be moved per year, unless you have a distributable event such as separation of service, age 59 and a half, a few things like that. I don't want to get too into it. But that's pretty much the only reason that you wouldn't want to move your money to the new plan. Otherwise, I think it makes a lot of sense. I think you're going to save a lot of money, and I think it's a really good program. Dan, that is all I have on the overview of the new CPS 403B and 457 plan.
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate it as always. All right, over to you again, Tom.
Okay, I want to thank Erica too for helping me with putting this together, because I kind of went off the one she had created before of how to move the money over. AIG, so if you have your money in, if you want to put it in AIG, you want to go to cps.aigrs.com. You want to click enroll, and you want to follow the on-screen instructions, and I'm going to say this, anytime you're confused or you're timid, I would call them. So far, they've been very, very helpful. And you might find, I've talked to a lot of teachers about this that said I called and the person didn't call back. You don't necessarily have to use the same person that's assigned to your district this time. You can actually go to the list and just pick somebody else. And they verified this. They said any one of us can help you through this process. So didn't want to just leave you with maybe call them. I definitely would call them. It's really been helpful just to make sure I got it set up right. Maybe the next slide, Dan. Thanks. So the Voya transfer process, you would complete an interplan form at CPS, the same website that we had before. The additional documentation required through a contract exchange may transfer in whole or part. And I believe that's what Scott was just referring to. If you're in the fixed asset, the fixed account, you it can't transfer over. It's going to take a period of 5 years. Now, some people may have already been transferring their money over from fixed account, like I did, over to Empower and be in the middle of the contract where they're moving it over. You just need to call them up and ask them about that, and maybe they can walk you through that. So it might get a little more complicated. Like you said, the 20% restriction or 5-year conversion of the fixed account, that's the only pain about it. I did get, just briefly, I did get one Voya representative that said even that they might send over as in whole. And I followed up with AIG, and they said, we don't think they're going to do that. We think they're still going to put in 5-year increments, but that could change. So next slide. Okay, so the Empower transfer process, you complete the interplan form at CPS, the same website. Additional documentation required through the contract exchange, may transfer in whole or part, and no fees or no restrictions. So I do want to say one thing about that I forgot to go over. When we talk about the contract exchange, again, I really would encourage you to call Empower or Voya, whatever you're going through, and have them walk you through that contract exchange. What I've noticed was on that same document, they have lots of other things that you can fill out. For example, rollovers to an IRA and other things like that. And even I am pretty confident with this stuff. I needed someone to walk me through what to skip and what part to go through. So I would call Empower or Voya and keep asking for representatives to help you with this process. And I asked as nicely as I could. There were some that said just follow the directions, but please try to get them to walk you through that.
Tom, to interrupt, because Allison, another genius teacher, brilliant, hardworking in our district, her and I are friends and both had Empower talking back and forth. Our reps, I mean, I'm still going to post on the BBB because for how little the Empower rep knew. They didn't know the form. I couldn't get the form on their website. They had to email it to me. So Empower gets tricky, but I echo your advice, Tom. Lean on your consultants at AIG and just, grit your teeth when Empower doesn't know anything. And if you need more help, reach out to Tom, me, Allison. We've all gone through it. it is a little bit disconcerting because they mail you a check with the
Mhm.
whole value of your years of retirement savings on a check, and you have to forward it to Dallas. But on the plus side, if the market keeps tanking, you might get, a significant discount on your reinvestment. So there's that.
Dustin, I'm glad you said that because I just was bragging. I shouldn't be bragging, knock on wood, that my check has been floating on the way from Empower to AIG for the last month. And so I've been missing all of this. And I'm like, well, maybe I'll luck out. Who knows, keep it going. I will say this, Dustin, that when you call them, they may keep you on the line for 20, 30 minutes, or they may ask to call. If they give you a chance to call back, that they will actually call back. So if you're frustrated by it, just hit that button, let them call you back and walk you through that process.